Hello again. Today I'm going to talk about a book that I wrote many years ago, Leper's Return. This book was published, he says, quickly referring to it, in 1998. It was the second book I brought out that year, immediately after Abbott's Gibbet. At the time I was writing books based on different themes that interested me, and to an extent my writing was developing purely because I was enjoying the fact that I could justify buying books, going and researching anything I wanted because it was tax deductible, purely because I was a writer at this stage. And I've always been interested in leprosy because it's one of those strange diseases. Everybody's heard of it. In medieval times it was one of those things that petrified people before the plague. After the plague, oddly enough, the fear of leprosy seemed to die away. But in medieval times, although from the look of things it wasn't a huge threat to the population of Europe, it tended to be more of a threat to people in the Middle East and so on, even so the fear of it was dramatic because I suppose the idea that your body could start to degenerate while you were alive, it would be almost like a living death, was clearly terrifying to people. Interestingly enough, I was asked recently if I could do a book on how I keep track of things, how I do my research. And going through an old pile of boxes, I found some of my original research material that I was looking at. And this book actually came about because I was doing research into leprosy and discovered in the British Library a great book that was the Monasticon, which was a history of all of the things that went on with the church in medieval times through to the present to a large extent. But the Monasticon version I got hold of included comments about the chapel of St Lawrence's Hospital, which was, as I found out of my notes, served by a member of Trinity Convent at Hounslow in London. The seal of Holy Trinity has Father on the throne, his hands raised to confer benediction, the Trinity at his feet, Hounslow House seal had 3 divines, etc. I did a lot of research up there, but the thing that interested me was that it gave me basic information about everything to do with the old Magdalen, the old leper colony on the outskirts of Crediton, as it was then. And that I found really interesting. It hadn't occurred to me that there might be a leper colony there. But what really appalled me was the way that the lepers were treated, because if you were accused of leprosy, for a start off, basically it was any kind of skin disease could lead to an accusation of leprosy. It didn't have to be any sort of genuine disease. It could have been some form of alopecia, for example, but if the local population thought that you might have leprosy, then you would be an outcast, and completely outcast. There were legal procedures that had to be gone through. I actually go into quite a few of them at the beginning of this book because the author's note goes into a lot of the research that I conducted. But what shocked me quite a lot was that if you were accused of leprosy, for example, you'd be taken to the church and you would be declared dead. Now this wasn't some vague insult. This was a serious accusation of death. So for example, a man who was accused of leprosy, his wife would immediately be declared a widow. They wouldn't be allowed to meet. The man would be taken in front of the altar and he would have the last rites and would have the funeral service read. He would be taken out from the church and forced to lie in a grave, and they would give him the full funeral treatment, and from that moment he ceased to exist. His will would have been carried out, so anybody who was going to be taking his property and so on would have it, and he would be expected to go and make a living however he could. Now the leper colonies were not punishment blocks. They were in fact generous charitable organisations where people were taken, and for example, people who were found to have misbehaved could be kicked out. And that was a severe punishment, because how would people survive? They weren't allowed to live off their existing income because they had none. They weren't allowed any. They were dead, legally dead. And so it was the whole idea of that how these poor, presumably terrified people would have survived, that really kicked off and sparked the whole idea of this. But that makes it sound as though it's a really grim, depressing book, and it isn't. In fact, my agent said it's my first love story, and she always adored it. I also think it's rather nice because it does have Chopsy in it, and Chopsy was a lovely dog. I have to say that, it's still my brother's dog now. So, I enjoyed writing it. I hope you enjoy reading it too. Don't forget, if you like this and you want to see more of my videos, do please put a like, comment at the bottom, do subscribe to the feed, and if it's something that sparked any ideas or given you any interest, then do please contact me either in the comments page at the bottom, or you can get me on Google Plus or on Twitter, on Facebook, or any of those other normal things. And I'll always try to respond as quickly as possible, because it makes it much more interesting as a writer if you get comments back from people who are reading your books. So that's it for now. I'll be putting another video up next Thursday. Thanks very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks a lot.